Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Roundtable Conversations podcast, episode 3. My name is Alec Vicari, one half of your hosting duo. Alongside me is my good friend Harrison Burkhart. HB, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. Super stoked for episode 3.
Episode 3. So I do apologize for our listeners. We want to keep routine on dropping our episodes on Fridays. We usually record on Thursdays, but due to the holiday weekend coming up and just some things that came, we are a day late. But we're glad you're here with us, and we got some great conversations, some great topics to cover today. Just a quick back brief. Last week we did touch on that transactional and transformational leader, and then we discussed the trust in the workplace and how those two components can actually develop and affect your leadership role and those around you that you influence. So I encourage you all to check it out and see what you can get from it. And before we begin as well, like, subscribe, comment. We do have our email down at the bottom there, roundtableconvos@gmail.com. We ask that you just submit any questions, inquiries that you may have. They can land on the episode. We'll talk about them. We'll discuss them. And if you do have interest on being on the podcast as a special guest, by all means, again, send that request. And we'd love to hear from you. HB, you ready?
Let's do it. Let's kick this off.
All right, man. First things first, motivation versus discipline. Now, I know this is a topic you and I have discussed for a while now, and I think we're both very passionate about. And I think it's one of those two concepts that we all embody, but it's hard to differentiate until you actually sit down and discuss with yourself of what those two components do for you and how you can actually empower yourself once you decipher from them. And so, HB, I kind of want to go with you first. What do you think the difference is in motivation and discipline?
I think motivation, you probably would maybe agree, would be something that it could be on and off. It's not a continuous, you get these spurts of motivation here and there. You might feel it. Somebody might be able to instill it in you through empowerment, a little bit of motivation that doesn't necessarily sustain, because you're on that transactional level of leadership, as we talked about in the last episode. It could be intrinsic motivation or extrinsic motivation, where it's like, hey, I want to, get to this point in growth. That's it. Once I peak out, I'm okay. Or I've wanted to buy this thing for a long time, so I'm motivated to save some money and get it. And it's hit or miss, right? Then on the discipline level, discipline is something that's sustained for a long time, and it's almost a habitual ritual that you've come to just ingrain in your mind and in yourself that, hey, I'm going to do this. I wake up at 5 o'clock. I wake up at 6 o'clock. I wake up at whatever time, and it's a daily thing. I do this task every day. I do my chores every day. Discipline is something that sustains and is remaining there through habits, versus motivation is you're maybe trying to form those habits, but they're not there just yet. And then I'd like to ask you, Alec, what would you think about what are some differences between extrinsic and intrinsic motivation?
That's a good question. I think with the extrinsic, you're looking at your goals, you're looking at the rewards, you're looking at possibly opinions and stature of your individual self within society, within your organization, within your workplace. I think with the intrinsic, that motivation is actually what creates the core, creates the discipline, and creates the work ethic necessary to get to those milestones and to constantly pursue through the resistance, through the obstacles, through the trials and tribulations. And I do think as individuals, as leaders, personally and professionally, I think we focus so much on the extrinsic motivations that what internally we don't really sit down and have that self-reflection, that self-assessment of why am I doing what I'm doing? What is meaningful to me and what I value? And we don't identify the importance of those things, because what tends to happen is when you go through these journeys and these paths to your goals, to those external external goals and accomplishments that you strive for, what happens is when you receive that resistance, when you have a roadblock, when you have a misstep, when you have a failure, like we talked about on episode 1, if you don't have those internal goals, um, the understanding of yourself and the why of why you started, I think it's so easy for us to lose trajectory of that pathway and begin to have a detour, or even to give up and go back.
You know what this makes me think is when we're in the gym, it's that mentality of, is my goal just to get like a nice chiseled physique, or is my goal to be healthy, right? Because motivation is that, hey, I'd like a nice physique, but that could fizzle out because I'm not getting there. But being healthy is something that needs to be consistent over time through that discipline. You might actually get that chiseled physique. Same thing when it comes to, I'm motivated to make a stripe in the Air Force, I'm motivated to progress and make rank. Yeah, it might work out, it might not, and it might be for the wrong reasons. But if you're disciplined within yourself through a culture of discipline, integrity, accountability, and you're willing to say that self reflection, you're looking in yourself and saying, hey, I need to discipline myself to be better on these spheres of resiliency, to get better in the physical, the spiritual, all those outlooks, then you'll probably be a better person through discipline, and that will get you to that next level. Even if you don't necessarily think it's going to happen, it's just you're at that level now. You're that person that can do it. So motivation versus discipline, it's a way different, I think, level, caliber of a person, because it has to sustain, and it's not easy. But over time and habits, building those habits, I think we can all get to it. My question, again, another question to you would be, what kind of tools and tactics do you utilize to create discipline within yourself?
Well, before I answer that question, HB, I kind of want to kind of speak to the audience, if I may, about what I think discipline is. And I think I want to kind of just talk to the audience about how you embody that, or how I have embodied that, if you don't mind. And I want to say first things first, that I see motivation as how you get started. I see discipline as how you stay committed through that journey that you have. And when we all look at ourselves and see, how do we get from point A to point B? How do we strive for our goals? How do we grow? How do we become better? I think we all look for that special ingredient, right? That equation that gives us the solution to the problem we have. And within our leadership tool set, we have those different applications. But I think the one ingredient that we all must obtain is self discipline, and that is personally, and that is professionally. And HB, if you don't mind, real quick, before I go on my run here, I'd like to read just a simple definition of self discipline to kind of lay down the platform of where I'm going with this conversation. You ready?
Let's hear it. I'm ready for this.
So, self discipline is the ability to control one's feelings and overcome one's weakness, and the ability to pursue what one thinks is right despite temptations to abandon. And I think that last part is pretty significant, and it's to maintain the course despite your temptations to abandon, because we all go through significant times in our lives, whether it's obstacles, trials and tribulations, upsets, victories, successes. Um, that motivation will show you the vision. It'll show you that end goal. It'll show you the end result, which then inspires you to get up off your feet and start moving, right? But as you kind of get into the trenches of things, as the day-to-day um, weight starts to bear on your shoulders, that end goal vision doesn't sound so sweet anymore. And it's that self-discipline, it's that discipline in your principles, in your values, and being grounded within yourself is what actually keeps you moving forward when that motivation is long gone, and things don't sound so sweet anymore, or the workload that's ahead of you doesn't seem so inspiring or worth it. Grounding yourself in what you believed in, grounding yourself in what the end result is, and what your meaning and values are, is what will get you there. um I watch a lot of motivational videos, inspirational videos. I listen to a lot of additional podcasts and speeches, and one thing I heard that I really loved was that, as human beings, as individuals, as leaders, we have no business being average, but we somehow justify it within ourselves, right? We justify that I didn't do this because X happened. I didn't get up early because I went to bed late, or I didn't get up early because my alarm clock, I didn't wake up from it, or I didn't study because I did it yesterday, or I didn't stay late because I can get back to it tomorrow. We define ourselves based on our popular opinion, and then we kind of compare ourselves to that, right? We look at those around us and we see, are we doing what they're doing? Are we doing enough? And if so, then I can rest. And I think when you have self discipline, and when you actually strive to become better, when you strive to be beyond the competition, when you strive to grow and empower those around you through that, you actually have to insulate yourself from popular opinion. You have to establish your own standards. You have to establish your own goals, and you have to establish your own individuality. Um, and how you do that, I would like to offer. And HB, I know I'm going, man. Please interrupt me if you feel needed. But I want to ask the audience, how do you use your 24 hours? And also within those 24 hours, do you place yourself in positions that are uncomfortable and that place you in a state of vulnerability? Oprah Winfrey, she wakes up at 3 a.m. every day. And I think the common person probably wakes up at 6 or 7, which doesn't seem so significant at the forefront. When you realize when a common man, common woman wakes up to pour their coffee and check their Facebook status, Oprah Winfrey's 3 hours in. She's had her coffee. She's read her chapters. She's probably went to the gym, and she's already working on the day's activities or maybe tomorrow's ambitions. And we all have the same 24 hours, but when you utilize them differently, when you take hold of each one individually, by time a week passes, by time a month passes, you're leaps and bounds beyond your competition, beyond your peers, beyond your coworkers. And then discomfort and vulnerability. How many times have we challenged ourselves? Because as human beings, I believe that we are naturally, like primitively speaking, we are meant to be comfortable, and we are meant to just simply survive. That's what's ingrained in us. And it's interesting how, from a primitive standpoint, that's where we are, right? We are here to survive and stay complacent. But discomfort and vulnerability are the necessary routes for growth, for betterment, for success. So it's actually quite a contrary and conflicting situation, is that we are built within ourselves, but within our DNA, our genetic makeup, to travel the least resistance of that route. But in order for us to transcend, order us to grow individually, professionally, in civilization, what have you, we actually have to enter that vulnerability, that uncomfortable situation. We have to be able to take that weight on our shoulders and press forward, break through those barriers. And so I offer that to our listeners, and HB, I'll give you the floor, but ask yourself, what are you doing with your 24 hours? And within those, are you comfortable?
It's what you say there about time is it's so valuable, because when I look at it, like, we all have this choice to how we manage our time and what we do with our time. And people tend to think, of course, some of us are set on better paths than others when it just, by birth or what we've come from, unfortunately, right? And different, there's different backgrounds, different people grow up in different homes, et cetera, et cetera. But when it comes to how we choose to spend our time and what we discipline ourselves doing, that makes or breaks what exactly our goals lead to and how we can fulfill those goals. So one thing or a couple things I'll add on to that is, how far and what are our goals? How far are we reaching? Are our goals small? Are they kind of minimal? Like, I'll read one chapter a year, or are they, I'm going to read 50 books a year? There's difference of goals. So if your goals are higher and further out, you have a higher chance to get to those, because you're going to work harder and further versus setting those small standards for yourself, which is accountability and that discipline factor. You talked about the hard things, doing the hard things, brushing your teeth with your opposite hand, right? It's engaging a different muscle in your brain. Most of us get to our 40% peak of what we can do and we give up. We don't stretch and grow and develop ourselves past that 40% of willingness. That's a Navy SEAL tactic is they'll just do 40%. Like, hey, I've read to my 40% window. I'm going to give it up. Hey, I've exerted myself to my 40% window. I'm going to give up. Push past it. It's a mind game. And when you start pushing past it further and further, you start building that discipline and you can go further with yourself. We tend to, you talked about this, and I think this is super valuable. We go out to the grocery store and we know things aren't good for us, but we buy it anyways. And then we put it in our pantry and we think to ourselves, I'm not going to touch that. I'm not going to eat that. But it's right there in front of you. You go to work and your phone's right in front of your face. What are you going to do? You're setting yourself up for failure. You have to discipline yourself and know yourself that to that point where if snacks are in my house, I'm going to eat them. If my phone's on my table, I'm probably going to text at work. Remove those barriers and make it easier for yourself to stop getting that dopamine high. Realistically, like, hey, if my phone's right here and there's a notification, dopamine's coming in. Versus if I'm working toward these goals and advancing myself through discipline, that dopamine's a little different, and then it becomes a habit of success for whatever your goals are.
I actually want to jump in, HB, is you actually touched on dopamine. And I didn't actually think we were going to go this route, and I'll kind of touch on it a bit and bring us back to the path. But you're right. So dopamine, right? There's actually a lot of scientific studies that are going on right now that are addressing how society today constantly receives dopamine. And that's through social media, that's through social apps such as TikTok, comments, likes, just that constant dopamine intake from what the digital platform has provided. And when you think about that, that constant intake and reuptake of dopamine has actually done substantially detrimental things to our individual aspirations of long-term goals, right? Because especially now with the new generation and the young leaders that are coming up, is they've entered a world to where they can get those hits of dopamine. They can constantly get that self-affirmation, not through hard work, not through struggle, failure, success, but simply posting a meme or a picture of themselves in their Facebook page blows up, right? So we're constantly getting that hit of dopamine, which then has left us to no longer pursue the accomplishments or the reward process of a long-term goal. And I think that does have a detrimental effect on our generation now, the generation after us, and really just the leadership and individual self of the future. And one thing you touched on as well, HB, is you kind of discussed the mind. You said, I'm going to buy this item from the grocery store, put it in my fridge, but like, how do I control myself of eating that or not? And I offer to our listeners that self-discipline is all about training your mind, and self-discipline is self-love. And with self-discipline, you're going to run into a lot of obstacles and a lot of hiccups during your journey to where the end goal doesn't sound so sweet anymore. But you have to train your mind on how you stay disciplined and how you stay focused on that path. You have to buy into your belief. Again, you have to insulate yourself from those popular opinions. And one thing you really honestly have to do is you have to enter that dark room, right? Maybe you have to step away from those around you. You have to step away from the app and you have to enter the dark room. And what I mean by that is you have to enter your mind and you have to really sit down with yourself and embody everything that there is. You have to embody the struggle. You have to embody the pain. You have to embody the conflict. And you have to really focus on yourself to be successful in this path, whether professionally or personally. And that's what self-discipline is.
You know what? You're talking, and it's like perfect to what I've been like. I have these notes, and I think it. So you're talking about yourself, right? But what about your future self? What you aspire to be? So when you talk about like, hey, I have a connection with this future being. This is what I'm looking at becoming in 10 weeks from now. If the discipline I'm doing leads me to that person, that's great. in 10 months from now, what does that person look like? In 10 years from now, what does that person look like if I am disciplined and I'm going through these motions and goals and achieving them, right? What kind of relationship do I have with that person? And why would I want to let that person down? And you also touched on, which I think is very valuable, is what's your circle of influence look like? Who are your friends? Who is keeping you disciplined, or who is kind of like the goals and the bar are a little lower than maybe you aspire to be, but you keep putting yourself in that environment and hoping to reach your future self even 2 days from now. And it's going to be pretty darn hard, you know? So who you aspire to be and what you're surrounding yourself with in that environment is going to get you to that 10-month self, that 10-year self, and I mean, where you ultimately want to be. So I had to interrupt you there, Alec, because I was like, man, he's talking about this, like, getting into with yourself. But what about what about that person you're trying to get to? What about those mentors that you're trying to get to? Like, how in touch with you are you with that person and those mentors to where you can channel that discipline and get to that level?
You said talking about your future self, and on the road to success and embodying discipline, self discipline. I think what that means really is that you have to be willing to sacrifice who you are today for who you can be tomorrow. And that's one thing we haven't really touched on is on the road to success. There's a lot of sacrifice. There's sacrifice of doing things that sound exciting, having that recreational fun, being with your friends, sometimes being with your family. What you choose to eat, what you choose to do, how much sleep you get, how long you're in that work center or at that desk or outside training. There is a lot of sacrifice necessary when it comes to self discipline. Because again, we go back to that primitive instinct of being comfortable, of doing what sounds fun and exciting. But when you have that self discipline and you're on that road to success, you're going to have to sacrifice a lot of things, and you're going to have to insulate yourself.
Do
And
you
I often
think
to
I'm interrupting you again because you're getting me these. I love this, man. The thoughts, but do you think those people that are like disciplined so heavily that they're almost obsessed with like what they want? They're so focused on that one thing that they're obsessed and they're willing to like do it almost whatever it takes. Where it's obviously ethical, right? But they're willing to do those things because they know that 10-year self or where their goals are, they will achieve it. And nobody will hold them back. I feel like it's like a borderline obsessed. And like what I've heard from people is like, you're crazy. How do you do that? Why do you do that? Like, well, these are my goals and I'm disciplined. And when you get to that discipline level, things just happen easier because you're not motivated. It's not like onesie twosies, I can do it. This is like what your baseline is like of performance through discipline.
you touched on the passion and obsession, and I think that's great. And I'm glad you mentioned it because that passion and obsession is developed and stems from your values, what you believe in, right? And when we first began this topic, we talked about how self-discipline is being like a disciple within your principles and your values, embodying those principles and grounding yourself in them. And so we talk about what self-discipline is, we talk about how to do it, like an application process, but our listeners need to understand fundamentally you have to sit down with yourself and you have to understand what you value, what you care about, and have your why. And when you have your why, that is when you can create the roadmap. That is when you can begin to pursue and walk that journey and break through those barriers and have that self-love, have that resistance, insulate, empower, and execute. And self-discipline isn't always pretty. It's not this wonderful thing. It can be gritty, it can be dark, it can be consuming. But when you have that obsession, when you have that passion, you know what you strive for and you know what you want, and you embrace your individuality. And I want to tell anyone out there, and it's the hard truth, that maybe hasn't started, that goal that they wrote down 2 years ago, or has all of these implications as to why they haven't begun, or why they stopped, or why they quit. And I want to tell you right now, excuses only sound best to the ones who make them. And I say that because we all have a life, we all have surrounding circumstances, we all have reasons of why not to. And I offer to our listeners for you to sit down and find your reasons why to.
You know, it's not easy to find your why because, you ask somebody, like, what's your why? And they're like, I have no idea. Start asking yourself these questions. If I were to die tomorrow, what would I want to be remembered for? If the most significant person in my life is reading my eulogy, what would I want it to say? How would I want it to read? If I'm on my deathbed and there's ghosts that are surrounding me and they're like, you couldn't do this, you couldn't do that, you didn't do this in your life. How many ghosts are you going to have on that deathbed? How many things in life did you not do that you could have done and you should have done? Write a list, 25 things that you want to do in life, and then only pick the 5 most important and focus on those. That's a Warren Buffett thing, right? And those are the things you got to start thinking about because life comes quick. And when you get to 40, 30, 50, whatever it may be, and you look back and you say, man, all I had to do was maybe wake up an hour early. I could have turned off Stranger Things season 4. I didn't have to watch it 55 times in a row. Like, what are you choosing to do? And then what is those questions, when you answer them, what is your passion and what are you working towards? Because you're not only going to miss out for yourself, but you're going to miss out for the people that you can influence and the impact you can make on other people's lives, your kids, your family, your spouse, those around you, your sphere of influence. That is so significant. And if we all have these significant attributes and special abilities, we're all failing if we're not truly developing and working on them and through discipline.
You know, I'll share a personal story if you don't mind, HB.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Is I know a lot of our listeners come from the military occupation, so promotion and testing is probably a huge extrinsic goal that they have, a motivation, and I think that path forward to that accomplishment takes a lot of self discipline, in personal aspirations, and then professional obligations and commitment. And I share with the audience when I was getting ready for E6 testing, it was very significant to me, and it meant a lot. And I wanted it not for just the stripes or just for the pay raise, but I wanted it to have a bigger platform to speak my truth, my opinion, and to have a larger influence on those I led. Um, and my focus was I knew what I needed. I knew the scores I wanted to strive for, and I had the platform of how to apply it. And within that process, I remember, I quit alcohol. I limited myself on entertainment. I remember that I woke up every day at 2 or 3 a.m. So when that sun came up and I was ready for the gym, I already had 3 hours locked in on studying, on rehearsal, on information and learning. I set a bedtime, so when my friends wanted to go out and party, couldn't do it. If they wanted to play Xbox and jump on Warzone, couldn't do it. I changed my diet. I changed everything about myself, and I built my 24 hours on that one goal. And I insulated myself. I entered that dark room of understanding who I was and where I wanted to go. And the results spoke for themselves. I was number one in the whole career field on my score. But that's not the significance of it. It's the fact that if you discipline yourself and if you have that passion for something and you stay committed, you can have that outcome. And as I put on that stripe, as I seen the scores and where I lied between my peers, everyone around me just saw the accomplishment. They just saw the success. They saw the final, me standing on the stage. But what they didn't see was what happened behind the curtains, the day in, day out, the sacrifice needed, those early morning wake ups where my body said, just hit the snooze alarm, or the temptations that were made when my friends wanted to go out just one night. And so I offer that story to our listeners because the road to success can be a lonely one at times. The road to success can be difficult, and it can be tiring, and it can be destructive. But if you stay committed, if you stay grounded, and you stay within your principles, you can become far better than who you are today and who you ever thought you could could become possibly.
That's, it's funny. It's not funny, but it's interesting that, we brought it up earlier with that, like, you just work on you're disciplining yourself and improving yourself, and you aspire to those goals and your why, versus just saying, I want to make staff, I want to make this, I want to be an NCO. Like, it doesn't hold much weight. And when those get into those ranks, it sadly doesn't thrive as it should, because they haven't, found that, key foundational aspect of what they're really doing it for. And it's just like your story. For me, it's the same thing. Like, when I made tech sergeant, I thought, like, I'm not very good, so I better, like, learn, right? So that was the goal, 100 books in a year, and I hit 120. And it wasn't because I wanted to be the best tech sergeant in the world. I wanted to be the best tech sergeant Harrison Burkhart could be. I wanted to be the best Harrison Burkhart so I could give it to others. It's not a selfish thing. It's more of a selfless, like, what can I do to give back? Same with master. I want to be in that position where I can give back to others. And if I develop myself and I bring others along the journey, maybe it happens, but it's better than trying to shoot for it for just like master, 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 because that's what people do. And then their ship sails further and further away as time goes by, because they have forgotten about discipline, and they look at those small motivational, which is normally, the extrinsic, like, ooh, I can go on this, or I can do this and get that award. Like, that doesn't sustain, and that's that burnout thing. People talk about burnout. People who are disciplined don't burn out. People who are motivated burn out, because motivation doesn't last. Discipline will. There's no such thing as burnout when you're disciplined, because you are in a habitual ritual of performance, sustained excellence, right?
Sustained excellence. And I want to wrap this up, HB, because I know we went a little bit longer than we thought on this topic.
We went in, man.
And I do just want to offer to our listeners, HB, you might be familiar with the quote, but Les Brown, motivational speaker, very inspirational, highly recommended to our audience. But he speaks and he says that the graveyard is the richest place on earth. And within the graveyard, you'll find hopes and dreams that were never fulfilled. And it's all because those individuals were afraid to take that first step. And so, I want to leave our listeners with that, because how many of us have had those ideas, those visions, those first creations, and we let them lay on the wayside because maybe we were concerned what other people thought, or we didn't believe in ourselves, or we were just afraid to take that first step. Yeah. HB, you got anything else for me on motivation versus discipline?
I think that's the hardest part, right? Is when we're talking about stretching yourself and we're talking about expanding your goals, is taking that first step. Hey, I've never done this. Big deal. Take the first step. Then the closer you get to that goal, the better it feels. And the more first steps you take and get closer to those goals, the more disciplined you start to become, and the more of a habit you form. It's not easy, but those first steps, like, literally, just think about that. Just take the first step. Stop buying the snacks that you don't need to eat. Put your phone away at work. Like, those small steps. You don't have to go out and do everything. Same with, like, running or getting healthy. You don't have to do this crazy diet to where you start going crazy or working out. One thing at a time, and then just build discipline over time, and then you'll get to where you want to be, and it won't be so hard.
And HB, before we wrap up this episode, you want to tell the audience real quick what the 5-6 is doing and what their platform is?
Yeah, absolutely. So I know we've talked about it a couple times in the podcast, but at the meetings, the next meeting is Thursday, 21 July at the Grizzly Bend Activity Room. 21 July, Thursday, Grizzly Bend Activity Room. We're just trying to give those NCOs on base or airmen that have accomplished ALS a platform to grow, collaborate with other NCOs, and just to be a part of a team culture that's building and developing one another. And then this month in July, we've got Leaders or Readers coming back, which is always a fun time. That's July 13th at 1300 at the Grizzly Bend. Then 15 July, we have a speed mentoring seminar. That's 15 July at 1300 at the Grizzly Bend. I think we got a couple other things coming. There's going to be a flyer on our Facebook page, but we're trying to do quite a bit to give back to the airmen and just develop within ourselves and give back to our units and our work centers, spheres of influence. So yeah, come out, bring an NCO with you. It's not a selfless thing, or it's not a selfish thing. It's a selfless thing. Bring those NCOs with you. Learn and grow together. Bring others out, and let's learn and grow together.
And HB, wrapping up, again, to our audience, our listeners, we're going to try to maintain that every Friday we have a episode pushed out to you guys. So keep on the lookout for that. Down below, you'll see our email, roundtableconvos@gmail.com. Again, send your inquiries, your questions. If you want to be a guest on the show, let us know, and we'd love to have you. HB, I know you've been in the works with a couple things in terms of our roadmap of Roundtable Conversations podcast. Do we have any pending guest speakers that you want to let the audience know?
Yeah, pretty excited. I know you're excited about this. I'm pretty excited too. Is we got the mayor of Great Falls coming out to one of the episodes in July. Command Chief, Malmstrom Air Force Base, Michael Becker, Chief Master Sergeant, will be coming on to the podcast. Pretty excited for that. We've got some other, lines out in there. They haven't bit yet, but if y'all have anything, other guests or things that you would find interesting, or if you'd like to be a guest on the show, shoot us an email at that roundtableconvos@gmail.com. We're always looking to just bridge the gap and have more conversations with other like-minded individuals.
And we're here to integrate. We're here to connect, and we're here to transcend and bring each other's perspectives together, so we can learn, so we can become better and grow. So I just offer that to our listeners is we welcome you aboard. We want to be part of your team, and we want you to be a part of ours. So again, thank you for tuning in, guys. This has been Roundtable Conversations Podcast, episode 3. We'll see you next week. Aim high.